Welcome all today for the first panel today. Thank you so much for being here. We are a little bit delayed. We had a medical emergency, but we are very happy. We had, thanks to the delay, we could gain an additional panel member who was just strolling by, and that is Davos. We have to improvise once in a while if you find all these global stars walking around and slipping out on the ice. So we provide a safe shelter for the ones who are marginalized and stranded in the snow. We provide a house and a roof over the head, and that's what we are going to talk about today, is about cities and real estate. So we have a huge task in front of us in the next 30 years in the world. We talked about education, we talked about healthcare, we talked about finance and whatever goes around. But the most important thing is, besides food and water, is to have a roof over the head. And that's what we try to provide in the Caspian booth here. And our roof is, on one hand, safe, it is warm, but it's also leaky. Now, this leakiness is not very good. And it's not very good if you try to accommodate 1.8 billion people over the next 30 years. Again, big numbers. Big numbers don't say anything if you're not affected by them. But big numbers tell a lot if you live in those centers that have not established a smart way how to accommodate all this newborn population in the world. So the importance of large centers is huge. Again, a big number. The global GDP is 110 trillion today. 50% of those are derived from urban centers. So the importance for global growth and provide a job is huge. 50% derived from urban centers is not from Davos. They talk about here, but they don't do it. So to plan and build, to manage these mega centers is highly complex and needs the most sophisticated expertise to not create social wasteland. And the social wasteland is extremely relevant. If you have too much social wasteland, populations start to be marginalized and they start to have other ideas. They will create ways to gain their territories back. Please. Our motto is finis origine pendet, and that probably does not apply more than to anything else to the planning of big cities, because they will last for decades to come. And the beginning is very important, and therefore we have the planning aspect stressed during these panels, and how to construct the centers in a smart way. You might have heard of Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. It was highlighted as a city of zero carbon emissions and this and that, in a collaboration with ETH in Zurich and many other corporations. Well, it doesn't work. It is not zero carbon emission. Cars are still driving, and they use artificial cooling system because the towers don't work. They don't suck in the wind that they try to do. Why? Because they try to take shortcuts based on cost. So they fall back to the old modes of constructing. Now that's a dreamland. That's a nice vision to have, but most people cannot afford to build a city in the desert. There's not enough desert to build enough cities. So they happen in the cities where we live in today, and they have to be remodeled, restructured in a way that they become resilient to shocks, to many ways of shocks. And I would like to welcome this diverse panel that tries to highlight all these different aspects about urbanizations of the opportunities, but also the challenges. I would like to start first with the aspect of planning. And to plan a city is very complex, and please welcome Alfredo from the ETH. Alfredo is, besides the director of the ETH for architecture, also the head and innovator of the Urban Think Tank, which is a global leader in how to accommodate those parts of the towns that are dysfunctional, where people live that have been marginalized, called slums, how to integrate them in a productive way into the cities. You will hear more about that. Then from the data aspect, we are privileged to have the head of blockchain Microsoft from Seattle, who was here also before, and it is so important to accommodate new technologies in smart cities for the better moving people around and so on. Please, York from Seattle. So nothing is going to happen if nobody pays for it. I mean, Cities are extremely expensive, and we talk about in 2014, the global real estate, I think in emerging was 1.4 trillion, around 1.4 trillion. The GDP of Switzerland is half of that. It's massive to build these towns up. And from the investment standpoint, we have Tamer. Where is Tamer? Oh, here you are. You sat down or he got bored already. You see, they want a quick return on the investment. So if they cannot sit quickly, please welcome Tamer from New York and Zurich. Now the big deal, we take today Uber, we sleep in Airbnb, we share office spaces, and all this. If you think in Davos, we are in a location that is used as a retail store during the year. All these houses along the way, they share the space for something else that is not useful during certain time of the year or the day. And the sharing economy is big. Sharing economy will only grow. Sharing spaces is a big part, and especially in new urban center becomes more and more an important part of how to structure the residential real estate, but also the commercial real estate. Please welcome from Partners Group is Andreas Thors, who is responsible for the sharing economy. Partners Group is $60 billion under management of the largest private equity investors in real estate on a global scale. In October, we were privileged to attend the opening of the largest infrastructure project last year, 2017, which is called the Wharf in Washington, D.C. It is I forgot the precise number, I think it's 2 times $2 billion investment. It was in DC, District of Columbia, in order to construct that, it's called a wharf, it is a historic district, it had to go through the Congress. A very complex project. The opening was big, it was a very big attention, and we had a good time there actually. And we also did a panel with the same title, Smart You and the Future of the City. Now, very important is, we can construct and build and new technology, beautiful, beautiful. Well, how do you build those structures, the real structure, the concrete, the woods, I mean, that the thing doesn't fall apart, that the roof doesn't leak, like in this house, we have leaky roof downstairs, just because a little bit too much of snow, that the buildings don't collapse, that the bridges are, not getting out of whack when they start to oscillate. Please welcome Walter. Walter has built the world's largest supplier of binders and bonders, which are absolutely essentials, called Sika, as CEO and president. Walter drove this increase during his tenure, the sales 400%. I mean, 400% is huge. I mean, any company can claim that in 10 years, besides a tech company, which is now just in a boom, is unheard of, and especially unheard of in the most basic industries called construction. Without the ingredients and the products of Sika, there would be no large bridges, there would be no high towers, there would be no tunnels that function and trains that work. So Sika is absolutely at the heart of the construction material, and Walter will tell us a little bit other kinds of materials that are essentials, and not only the computers and the digital beauty which we have. And here comes somebody who was straying around and sleeping in the igloo in the snow outside. I felt pity. A dear friend, and we just discovered, I didn't know he was sleeping under the tree out there. Well, what is he doing without a roof over his head? But this is terrible. I mean, you feel pity, obviously. It's warm inside. Hannes picks up exactly these people, the ones who are marginalized by the growing boom in cities. We talk about Teslas, we talk about beautiful hotels, the 4 seasons. Well, there is a 5th season, which is the ones who have no season. And the ones who have no seasons are stranded. And if they're stranded, they go down. They go down in society, they go down in individuals. Hannes picks them up. Hannes builds villages. He accommodates the ones who have been stranded for many different reasons, and you build them up, you make them independent, proud citizens that are independent economically, that can build families and incomes in Cambodia, in other emerging countries. His partners are the world's largest corporations, including Sika, which is one of the largest donators to his efforts. We have UBS, we have many other companies who provide, and ETH with the smart planning. Please welcome Hannes. And thank you to jump in here. I would like to take the opportunity that each one of you could briefly present yourself, what you do, and how the digital the new digital technologies can improve your segment. Please, Alfredo.
Sure. Can we have a video? So let's do a video first. I'll talk about two ideas, top down, bottom up, right? Analogous, hands-on technologies, simple games people play to create cities. And then on the other hand, super complicated digital technologies. So let's play this. It's our new project for Switzerland. The idea is here to create a database
of different policies. The urban sprawl scenario and technology insertion scenario. Varied in population growth, leading to continuous expansion of built volumes as sprawling or densification of built space. These aspects, along with technology uptake decisions, for example, self-driving cars adaptation, lead to different outcomes. For example, in terms of traffic times and externalities, or availability of services. The comparison allowed quantifying the impacts of proposed scenarios on the elements of quality of life. Diverse stakeholders will use the system and provide feedback.
What we're making is this system, it's very
Such
complicated to do, where a city planner can look at all the layers of developing a city. He can do scenarios if you sprawl horizontal, if you concentrate the city and go vertical. And you can see how much energy is produced if you choose one of those scenarios. So I won't go more into it. It's a complicated system. It's going to take a long time to finish. In fact, we need capital investment on that. Let's go to the next.
And technology.
Yeah. So now this is, now you can take off the sound. Yeah, good. So now this is more the hands-on physical board game. Go next. Sorry, I'm supposed to switch these things. I'll go very quickly. Okay. So you can take a building. We can now make cities that are open buildings. All of you can maybe look. Why don't we design blocks and buildings that have functions that can change over time? You can distribute program, you can adapt them. And so we can play these games of how a building could grow over time. And we can also look at a street, for instance, and look at individual agendas, what typology should go into a street. Let's say this street, a main street, any street in the world, villages. So we're talking about how we can actually develop community of villages. Now, if we take, for instance, Cape Town, you see this village of slums, of shacks, sitting in the middle of Cape Town. Imagine Cape Town has Cape Flats, which goes for millions of people in shack houses. So what do? We play a game with the community. We divide them up. 68 families is about the right size, right, to be able to work with them. And now, let's see if I have to click. With the families themselves, you say, can we redistribute the land that you've been squatting? Where would you like to live? How would you distribute that? And we can re-block them into new neighborhoods by using very simple explorations. And these are the new neighborhoods being built. You can see them right now. They're basically townhouses, row houses, but all the facades are built by the community themselves. All we've done is create the framework of the different sides of modules, and then you can take, for instance, another app we're doing, which is any city, where you can design, I'll do it with my finger, you on the app can design the streets, you can then look at the amount of buildings that you want, you can put your buildings in, and you can play it until you fill it, and then there's too much density, and we can look at one block in studying that, how the density, then you can do a sun diagram for that block, and then you realize that you have to get rid of some blocks, and there you go. And you can play this game. And the idea is, this is the interface to create community participation in the building of cities. It's no longer only top-down, that's to create the zoning maps, but the people must participate in the city. And you can come and have these diagrams that will tell you how well a city you have built. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was amazing. you're, from a digital perspective, I mean, you are at the backbone of many things that we don't see. Now, it is cool because Alfredo can show, well, the plan on the app, beautiful colors, good things going up and down, the sun revolves around, and everybody's happy. And then you can build it, things you live in. Now, yours comes from a standpoint we don't see. But what we have just seen wouldn't be possible without you. So how do you apply what you do in terms of to urbanization?
Sure, thank you. So my personal passion is blockchain, and I've been doing that for about 3 years. About 2 years ago, I actually discovered an interesting aspect of blockchain, which is you cannot participate in blockchain without having an identity or a key. And so that sort of led us down this road of individual identities, self-declared identities, some people call it self-sovereign identities. If you think about these models, and great application would be to back that up with some cloud horsepower, right? So you can really scale it out. And refabricating a city, this is about individuals, right? It's about their individual lives. How do you increase the welfare and the health and the financial status of people in communities around the world? So we have at Microsoft a number of initiatives that are focused on this. We have one called Smart Cities, which we want to downsize for Hannes. And we have IoT practices where we're taking sensor ingestion from all the devices that you might have in various places around the world so that we can monitor what's going on in the health and the soil and monitor actually the quality that's coming out of the food that's being produced in local communities, trying to optimize for perfect production, meaning that you're not overproducing because you don't need to, and therefore saving our natural resources. So there's all kinds of different sort of themes that weave through this, from personal empowerment of people around the world to sustainability of resources. And as a company, we look at things like AI and blockchain and identity and cloud scale as tools to apply to these humanitarian and cultural problems that we have. So that's where we're coming from.
Maybe a brief question. IoT is what?
Okay, so IoT is a term. Of course, it's a very technical term, but it's essentially any kind of sensor device. If you think about a cell phone, for example, there are sensors like fingerprint sensors. There are many other types of sensors like GPS and accelerometers and things like that on your cell phone. If you want to measure soil in a field, in a remote field, you'll need to have a sensor in the soil. That's an IoT device. If you have a Amazon Alexa in your home, that's an IoT device, which, by the way, listens to you all the time, just so you know. So those are the general category of IoT, is any kind of sensor device. In a context like this context, where you need to get sensor from the field, it involves many, many things. And you think about these remote communities that don't have internet connectivity. How do you get that through ingesting the sun into a device to create power, to power a GPS or a GPRS signal so you can actually load data up? And how do you do processing locally? And so there's all kinds of technology weaved behind the scenes in order to make this stuff happen.
Anything that senses, that registers, that measures, that picks up things, whether all these tools and devices, these are Internet of Things.
That's right.
So there are things. That's a very precise term. And this is great. So here we come, the money man. Now, nothing will work without the liquidity and the dough in between. Now, Tamer from New York, he has been building and constructing around the world. He has been building in OECD countries, starting from Switzerland, Germany, Austria, wherever in Europe, then going also to India, in Latin America, and in America, and particularly in the United States, building Formula One racetracks. Now, that is a big urban project, to move people faster around urban centers. I don't know if it's the most efficient way, and they're quite dangerous to do so, but it's interesting. Maybe we can do more Formula racetracks to get faster from A to B. Please, Tamer.
Well, racetracks get you from A to A because the start line and the finish are the same. So I'm not going to talk much about that. I was asked to speak about blockchain and real estate, and we see a lot actually happening, particularly in India, where the Indian government is moving everyone to biometric IDs, which you can buy for $8 apparently. And And the land registry, which does not exist in the same form that we have in Switzerland, where title is always disputed, is now being moved onto a secure, open, distributed platform so you can buy real estate and know what you're buying. In the US, you can't really do that. That's why Americans have title insurance, so that you are sure of what you bought, because it's not always clear. So there's a big movement towards digitalization of land registries, using the blockchain. And in terms of the video that Alfredo just showed us, I strongly recommend everyone to read Herman de Soto's book, The Mystery of Capital, if you have not read it. In particular, the problem people have, what we see in India, is access to credit. So our platforms in India are lending money to people to buy homes. We're lending money on projects where other banks will not lend because there's disputed title. And there's then a whole sector beyond that, the other 600 million people who live in mud huts in villages where they're illiterate, they're not on the grid, they don't have bank accounts, and there's no title. Without title, you cannot use your asset. So what De Soto proposes, and similar to what you're showing here to do, I've been living in my favela, in my hut for decades, for generations. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. If I leave, someone else will take my squat, effectively. If you legalize the squat, if you give these people access to credit, they can open businesses, they can swap. Maybe they don't want to be there, they want to be there. But they have no, so the entire system is broken, is blocked. If you can unlock that by creating, through transparency, through blockchain, through creative approaches, there's a tremendous way that you can dynamize economies. And that's precisely what De Soto shows in his model in Peru, how they were able to turn things around. And I think it's a model for growth across the developing world.
Follow De Soto.
Herman.
Herman De Soto.
Follow him.
Follow him.
Read him.
He's very well known in Geneva, by the way. He's very active down there at the Graduate Institute. Thank you so much. The second money man, Partners Group, $60 billion under management, one of the biggest private equity investors, particularly in real estate. We are not going to talk about that aspect from Partners Group. We talk about another one, and it's an aspect that Partners Group has deemed as one of the priorities, which is how do we utilize spaces better? How do we improve how people work together, how they live, how they travel also? And it's called the sharing economy. How can we better share our spaces? This is a very complex issue. And Andreas Thors from Sweden built up companies to do exactly that. And he had joined Partners Group 1 year ago, I think. 2 years. 2 years ago. And is now building up that segment. It's probably the fastest growing interest within Partners Group. How do you share spaces? Please, Andreas.
Well, I think, let's, as you started off by saying, I think everyone on their smartphone has Uber, Airbnb, and so forth. And just in Europe, people are expecting the sharing economy to roughly represent 570 billion euros 2025. People expect sharing economy in China to represent 15% of GDP at 2025 as well. So clearly, this has a massive impact. And you can see that predominantly from the network effects of the sharing economy. None of these companies actually own much. They sort of provide and facilitate. So while it took Hilton 90 years to build 600,000 rooms, took Airbnb 4 years. And I think one example is one of the previous companies I worked with, a peer here in the UK, where we provided short-term lets in commercial spaces in London, throughout UK, and then also in France and the US. We worked very closely with public organizations like TfL, the London Underground, in order to improve the commute of the citizens, also improve and revive urban areas that previously might have not been used for commercial use and so forth. And now at Partners Group, obviously, we look at different things, and I think the data is just there, right? I think unfortunate for a UK citizen, they spend 106 days of their lifetime looking for a parking space. And 30% of traffic in our cities are just there because they're looking for parking, nothing else. So we see tremendous opportunity in this space.
So to reduce the days wasted on looking for parking spaces is a big issue.
Yeah, and congestion
agree.
in cities overall.
Okay.
So yeah.
Zurich, I think Zurich should hire you because I mean, they try to raise the parking lots. It's a terrible thing in Zurich to do. Not only this, if you find one, they stand in front of the car, you didn't pay yet. They write you a $40 ticket. So now we heard about new technology, about finance. Well, nothing will work if you don't have the concrete, the woods, the stones, the laminates, or things don't really like. The things, these are ugly utilities that produce all this ugly material which is hauled off during the night so nobody sees it during the day. They dump it somewhere and then it stands just there. Well, it doesn't happen as magic. The largest industries in the world are commodities, and commodities are the pillar and the fundament to where we sit on and live in. Walter, having been the director of some of the world's largest company, by the way, not only of Sika, it was also on the board of Lonza, on the board of Alusuisse, on the board of SGS. He was the one who recruited the CEO of Fiat Chrysler, Sergio Marchionne. You mentored him, you brought him in, and now he's the #1 manager in the car industry. So there's so many things around Walter that I don't know, but we cannot overstress the importance to have the fundament of society where we stand and sit on. Please, Walter.
Yes. I am not of the generation of the digital generation, I am of the generation of materials. And to build the towns, we need materials, mainly steel and concrete. And there we have two problems. First of all, the urbanization will be going on in some parts in Asia, not anymore so fast in China, so it's nearly completed, but in India and others. It's the same in Africa and Latin America. And there we have a problem. We have we have a lack of gravel. And without gravel you cannot build.
So we do not
concrete.
have enough stones.
Yes, and there is a project. There is a project between a Technical University of Zurich and the University of Singapore. They try now to replace stones by fiber of bamboos.
With Gerhard Schmidt, I think, right?
This is one of the solutions. The second problem we use today most steel and cement. And these two industries are the two biggest industries in CO2 production. There we have to find a solution too. Steel, there is on the way. I think there will be replaced in construction in a lot of parts by carbon fiber in few years. And also in cement, there are some ways to find a solution, but it's still going on, and this will change the industry, mainly cement industry in the next coming year will change. Has to change.
So we are running out of stones. We take the bamboo and mix it up with something to make something better. And the cement and the steel industries are polluting too much. Well, if we don't have stones, we don't have steel, we don't have concrete, how are we going to live in the future?
Yeah, we have to replace by bamboo's fiber. It's a plan to grow very fast. One has made the calculations, there would be the chance. But it's not yet, the solution is not there established, but it's on the way.
It's on the way, yeah? So to replace existing materials, we're taking actually renewable material.
Yes.
And mix it up with what is abundant.
Yeah, with an adhesive, there are a lot of adhesive, artificial. Today already, it's a lot of cement can be replaced by new plastic-based carboxylate, which was invented by the Japanese. They thought to create a new engineering plastic just for gluing. Before it was used natural, normal stuff.
Well, thank you. Now, here comes the snowman. Well, he called me the snowman because I'm dressed in white, but actually I picked him up from the snow living in the igloo, Hannes.
Okay, I have to get up. I'm a better talker when I get up. So, okay, I tell you, I'm looking every year very much forward to come to Davos. It's the place. I'm an artist, and this gives me a guarantee: 5 days, 3 paid meals a day. You know, I mean, this is great here. You know, I still have to sometimes pay for my bed, but I'm getting there. Maybe in another 5 years I get the bed for free too. Okay, I'm not scientist. I'm not on this level of these guys. I'm a field guy. And I like to tell you quickly the story, how this all came about. 5 years ago, I was in Cambodia. I saw a girl. She was terribly burned, her face, her body. I started talking to her. I realized she's not Thai, she's a Khmer. Her story, well, she comes from a 9-head family in Battambang, rice farmer. Father had lots of debts, no money left to pay. And his only chance was to pay back to the Chinese who lent him the money, was to selling her 2 youngest daughters. But they didn't want them. So he took a blowtorch and he burned waist, face, body. She was terribly, terribly blinded on one side. And she got sold to an old woman. The old woman sold her straight to Thailand to a begging syndication. And that's where I found her. And I was shocked from the story. I offered $500 to the syndication, like a dog. They gave it to me. I took her back. I smuggled her over the border in the north of Cambodia and brought her back in an orphanage. And there I learned that if I want to know where these children are coming from, and that is many, over 300 children every year in Cambodia have been plunged in acids and been sold into the begging syndications, then I have to go out to the dump site, and I start living on the dump site. And for me, it was a horrifying experience because I realized very quickly every day new people coming into this dump site. And this dump site, an awful place to live. And they are not 100,000, no, they're 10,000. Phnom Penh has grown in 3 years from 600,000 people to 1.7 million. And these are the underprivileged. They move from the countryside with no skills, with no education into these cities, and they are very vulnerable. We have over 6,000 girls in child prostitution, 5 to 12 years old, women in prostitution. Women got slavery in the textile garment manufacturer. And I said, this is crazy. And then you see these NGOs, you know, they come in and help into the slums. But then I realized we have to get these people out of the slum. So my idea was very clearly, in first moment, I said, I have to build something outside. We have to stop urbanization. This is going to be the biggest problem we're going to face. I bought 9 hectares of land, 60 kilometers outside, and I start to build my city. And then I realized, okay, city, yeah, I do agriculture, I build a school, right? I also build a hotel because the hotel people come and visit me. This is my cash machine. Very expensive, $400 a night, but I tell you it's a dream, right? Okay, but then I also thought I have to build a city not for today, I have to build a city for tomorrow. In my school, the children to go to school started on the 15th of November. They're coming out of 9th grade 2027. They're coming out of higher education or a trade they learn by 2031, 32. And they only by 2035, 2038, they are craftsmen or that they can really fulfill what they have to do their life. And only their children in 2050, 2055, they will be on a level like this. And then, of course, ETH was supporting me, they did the planning, Sika was helping me so that I can build all my structures. I have a lot of people start to understand what I'm doing. But then I realized everybody talks about smart cities. I think this is great, but why don't we talk about smart villages? Because if I have a smart village, the people don't have to move into the city. Only smart cities, great, fantastic. But this doesn't really help us to solve the problem. So now I'm building the first smart village, maybe the first one in the whole world. And you have to understand, end of this year, 35,000 people live in my smart village. By 2020, 70 to 80,000. By 2025, I start to duplicate it. PricewaterhouseCoopers got on my project, we did a model calculation. If we can start duplicating by 2025, by 2030, we have 7 smart cities in Cambodia. 35, 17. By 2045 to 50, we will produce 30% of the GDP of this country. And this is a vision.
Thank you so much. So today, 50% of the GDP is from urban centers, and your mission is to bring 30% to the smart villages.
No, it's like this. Cambodia lives 85 to 90% is import. We have nothing. This country has been ruined by the Red Khmer. I'm sorry to say the president Hun Sen is a Red Khmer. since 1985. We are from the 168 countries, corrupt countries, 165. I mean, now the Chinese just signed 21 contracts. I mean, in 10, 15 years, the Chinese will decide what's the regulation, the rules is in this country. So, but we have to fight against this. I only exchange the import through domestic production. I mean, the Cambodians want to eat their chicken, their pig, and their vegetable. They don't want to have the Vietnamese. They don't like them. And I think there is a lot of models like this. Very simple understanding. I told you I'm not an university person. My life was my university. I'm a 72-year-old guy, you know, who still tried to find what can I really change in that world. But it's sometimes just, with all this, it's very important, but it needs very simple, down to earth. It needs people on the field. I tell you, come join me. Live 2 nights in a slum with me, and it will change everything you ever understood in the past.
Thank you so much. Do we have a slum in Davos?
Well, I don't think so. If there is one, it's on a very high level. I mean, if you pay $750 for sleeping on an air mattress, I don't know.
In the snow igloo, probably more
Yes,
expensive
yeah.
to provide with the first. Thank you so much for the first round. This is really, really, the diversity you see and the challenge of urbanization have been touched already. Finis origine pendet is the thing. How do we plan better for the future and a better outcome, particularly not just for the future, but with a better outcome that we have today? And digital technology can provide us with some opportunities. In this, I would like to address the opportunities that we have that can radically change how we organize ourselves, how we move around, how we better utilize the water, the energy, and also the waste management in these urban centers. It's a big issue in most towns. If you go to an Italian town, in Naples, I don't know in what frequency they are collecting the waste. I think every couple of months or something like this, and that is in Europe. We're not even talking emerging country. How people move around from jobs to where they live, to where they shop. I got a little glimpse on that aspect from this wharf in Washington, D.C., where they try to address all these issues, building a town within an existing town, probably one of the most complex on Washington, D.C., because for many, many reasons. I would like to hear maybe, again, starting with Alfredo from the planning aspect, how did you show that, all you showed us has to do with digital from the planning aspect, but what would you consider the most radical change that digital technology can bring us for making better towns?
Well, I think participation, I mean, that's the real thing. I mean, and people need to visualize different scenarios. So cities don't really, I mean, Modi has said he's going to build, 5 million cities between Delhi and Mumbai, right? Because they need to grow. And India is definitely a great growth. But what do those cities look like? Is anyone doing any investigation on what those cities should be like? I mean, are they going to build Shenzhens like China, a 10 million city, and it's just a copy of a city from, the 1950s or something? It's really, there is no real innovation in how cities could really work. How do we tie the countryside back into the city, right? How can we have a circular economy? How can we actually make buildings that can adapt over time? Do we make expensive buildings that last for, for a long time, for 100 years, the way Europe was built? Or do we now start to make open buildings or frameworks in which we can change the use of those buildings? The building can change. Well, if you guys remember Italy, for instance, it's just, we go back into our own history. The old nave was a farmhouse that was used for agriculture. Then it was turned into a convent, and then it was turned into a school. Then it was turned into a hospital, and then it was turned into a university, and then it was turned into residential, lofts or whatever. So, or art galleries. So if you see, it's the same typology of a building that gets reused over time. So why are we building these such site-specific buildings? Why don't we build a more generic city that's open and cheaper and more adaptable? Number one. But then again, on the other hand, we have a huge growing poor population, right? By 2030, we're 7 billion. There'll be 9 billion, right? On this earth, 2 more billion, and those billion will be born in Africa and Southeast Asia, and they will be born in slums. So what are we going to do in this balkanization of the world, this division in the world, where we don't even have any land tenure of all those slums and squats all over Africa, etc., Southeast Asia? What do we do? How do we bring those people into some kind of standard of living? And that's the real challenge. So how can technologies be the interface between the kind of centric city and expensive centered cities and the kind of sea of poor people squatting?
Walter.
I think digital can help us most in traffics. Not only in person, it's also in materials. In New York, the biggest problem for construction is the logistic. It's not to building a high rise, to bring the material in. And you have in India towns you can get in with trucks from morning 7 o'clock up in the evening, only at night. And there we have to find solution, and even more in materials. And I think in Switzerland they have now the project, we think a very good idea for the goods, a subway, to build a subway for goods transportation. And it's 35% of the transport on the highway. It's related to construction, 35%, not personal.
1/3, 35% is on the highway is purely moving stuff around.
It's moving constructing, stuff, including the wash machine, all this stuff, windows, whatever, rooms, carpets. It's 35% all over. And there we have to find a more intelligent solution.
That is huge. I mean, these are also the ones that cause a lot of problems for the normal daily traffic and everything like this. It's also the ones that probably could be automized and with driverless mobility, whatever. That is amazing. I mean, talking about okay, so we have mobility now. Jörg, you represent the technology aspect. I mean, the backbone of all these new things, how to make things smarter. Microsoft is pretty much a very smart company. Hopefully. If not the smartest. I mean, okay, we don't have Google here or anybody of the other guys, but please.
But you have in ETH, they have a program where you can see the traffic according to the iPhone. Yeah. You see how the iPhone move in the town in the morning. It's very interesting. And then after 9 o'clock, it goes down. At 12 o'clock, it comes. And this is only by digital possible. And it's the same with transport. There is a huge problem to find an algorithm better, or even one has to think more on materials too, not only on persons.
So the wish of, and you hear this from our CEO and some of the cultures that we talk about at Microsoft, we don't want to be in the forefront in technology. We want to enable people to do more in the world, right? And to do more with the resources that we have. And it's one of the reasons why we've been focusing on identity and why we announced the support of the ID 2020 initiative this week. If you think about all the things, no matter whether it's in remote areas where people are being born in slums or in cities, or to your point about food production, the only way that we'll actually make that situation better is if we can start to codify all of those things and identify them and start to really follow and trace what's going on with the produce in the world and the commodities and things. So one of the number of different interesting aspects, and you mentioned some of the statistics before, but there's 50 million people born every year who never get a form of identity, right? If you don't have an identity, you cannot go to ETH, right? You can't participate in society, whether it's in a remote region or in a big city. So when I talk about identity, I always sort of break it down to the remote village and how we actually transact in remote villages, because it's at the basis of trust between two human beings when they exchange goods. That's a transaction. If we can codify that transaction and codify those commodities and start to attribute that economic history with the people producing those goods and purchasing them, then we can actually create a record of the types of transaction that a person's producing in remote areas of the world, start to allow them to then get credit, right, against those economic transactions, which helps just build up the local communities where they are, right? And this, I think, goes to one of the things that we're talking about, which is we need to help find ways to keep people being successful where they are, where they want to be, in many cases, and we'll actually, achieve a lot more, I think, as a society.
You're focused on giving you provide products or services that enables people to rise, to give them an identity, to become an identity for trust building within the local community.
Well, it's actually translating the physical trust that's established when you barter into a digital codified form, such that, for example, a hedge fund could create loans or loan products, right, to provide credit to someone in a corn-producing region, right, where you would then be able to, for example, at a co-op, purchase a drying machine, which are expensive, but just changing the humidity by drying them in corn, for example, changes the price of the corn dramatically in the market, right? So if we can start to codify these transactions, we can create credit, we can start to give more tools to those communities such that they can actually sell their crops at a better market price. And then the other part of that, and we see this in financial markets all over the world, is price transparency, right? These people are selling their corn and their crops, and it goes through many, many, many different intermediaries before it actually gets to a consumer who consumes it. That is a huge waste of money being transferred from hands to hands because there's a markup every time it gets transferred. So moving removing intermediaries is a big concept of decentralization, and it actually has the impact of creating more value in the system for everyone.
Thank you so much. Andreas, yes.
Yeah, I think then that's also part of the sharing economy, I would say. It's having no intermediaries and also thinking about the trust aspect, right? I think a couple of years back, we probably wouldn't have gone into a stranger's car or rented out your house to some couple of strangers or whatever. And I think the sharing economy has actually took us back to when we were a smaller community, even though we're a global community today. But that type of trust building is something that we see in the sharing economy has taken down a lot of boundaries and so forth.
Yeah, it's also unlocked tremendous assets, right? So if you've codified my apartment, right, and now I can sell it without an intermediary, right? And that's part of what digitization does. It unlocks assets that are currently locked.
Because, for example, right, 55% of the time offices are standing empty, and that's why WeWork came into the market, because they saw that under usage. That's why we have cars that are 95% of the time are not being used and just standing parked, and that's how we try to see that utilization rate going up.
To unlock stranded assets, really, by sharing economy, sharing spaces, time, whatever.
600,000 homes in the UK are empty, for example. Why is that? How can we solve that? Can we go through, some sort of Airbnb type of solution? Can we involve the UK government in order to provide cheap housing and so forth?
I mean, this is an example of hugely wasted resources, right? So by codifying those digitally, you can now unlock them.
You codify them, and they become, by this standardization, become transactable in a more better way. Tamer, you had.
I just wanted to come back to what you were saying about transportation and the data usage. So first of all, India is building, yes, plenty of cookie-cutter cities. We've backed about 400 million of investment in new townships, and I can tell you there is zero vision of any kind. It's an eyesore. It's replicating Shenzhen, Dubai. There's zero urban planning. So we'd love to have you come and visit India with us.
Super.
But if you just look at Switzerland, you can take an ongoing debate in Bern about the new tram line. Should Bern invest 200 million in one fixed line from Königs to Ostermundigen? Or should you talk to the Post and the Mobility Lab in Sion about how people actually move in a city, instead of doing a hub and spoke system, putting in place autonomous navettes? They will be running within 5 years in Switzerland all over. And I don't need to use Uber, it'll just be transport. It might be SBB, it might be a postcard, it might be Uber. I want to go from A to B, the quickest and cheapest possible. The Post will be installing every 300 meters in our cities e-bikes and public bikes for usage. So maybe I take this route from here to here and an e-bike to there, instead of waiting for the 6:37 train to Klosters and then change. And so I think there's a lot of things that will be happening, and you need to decide as a city, as a region, as a country, do we invest the 200 million in a fixed tram line? Do we invest in autonomous vehicles and mobility concepts? What is the right mix? Is it an Ergänzung, so a supplement to the public transport, or can it replace it? So I think there's a lot of mobility concepts that will dramatically change how we think about urban planning, because now Oostermundigen is planning on the basis of the tram line being put in to change their Gestaltungsplan, so the zoning plan, and go from 4-story buildings to 12-story buildings. Because if I have a tram line, I'm part of the city, and if I'm part of the city, I go higher, and going higher actually can help us avoid the pollution onto the green spaces in the land. So you have all the green guys who are for it, and the SP is for it because of the ÖVAU. The SVP doesn't like it because they're spending too much money. But you have to decide as a city, as a community, what you want, and having tools available to it. I can't really imagine what it will look like in 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I would love to have in the public debate the ability for people to have this discussion and have all stakeholders give their views, vote, and decide.
Bring back the decision to the individual, and not from. Now, bring back the decision to individual. Hannes, you mentioned something very important just previously before. You accommodate the marginalized, the stranded citizens. Yeah. And what has digital technology to do with all that? Why is it so important of what you are doing?
Well, I'm using it at the moment in 2 different fields. First, it's in agriculture. You have to understand, we have only underprivileged people live with us. They cannot read, they cannot write. And the crazy thing is, if we think about having no education, we even further down, they have no understanding. I learned that we do things with our conscience, even moving a cup from A to B. If I tell a Cambodian, hey, can you move this to this? And then the next day I say, can you do the same thing? He says, what? I don't know, I have forgotten it. Right? So at the moment we use digital knowledge control in our agriculture. I have about 150 hectares of really competent organic vegetable growing. So there are drones, they fly out automatically in the morning. They give us the data, soil conditions, humidity, growth standard. This is also difficult because my local agriculture engineer, they have very little knowledge about the soil. So there I think we can do quite a big process so we can get more out of 1 square meter or out of 1 hectare. And we have to really concentrate us. Agriculture feeds us, agriculture feeds mostly our whole population, and we cannot afford to waste square meters where nothing is grown or badly grown or the wrong system is grown. Then the second part, and that's very important, is education. I have 1,000 children in our school system. By the end of the year, we're starting with kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, primary school. And these are unprivileged. They have no idea. They've never seen a toilet where you can flush. They've never seen even actually an electrical toothbrush or a water boiler. They eat like dogs. They have maybe the whole family. They have 1 plate, 1 pot. They have a charcoal. So when they come to us, they don't know even to use our toilet. I mean, the teachers, even the teacher is the worst problem because they take the children in the classroom, and we have beautiful classrooms. And if a girl has to go to the toilet, they put them in the sink and they make their number 2. And after 1 week, we find out it's all blocked. And then we find all this kind in there. So it's also the teacher who don't have actually this base of education. For us, it's important. We start in kindergarten, not to teach them how to use an app. We teach them how to program, understanding the base of a children's book, programming. Because they're underprivileged. But if they go through a 9-year school system like this, and we can really teach them and teach them and teach them, I would even bet in 2030 they will be the cracks, because they will have a better foundation, a better understanding than what our children will have by then. And that's the two parts. Robotic, I was asked before, do you use robotic on your harvesting your rice? Well, it would be wonderful, but keeping 10,000s of people out of the job. The families have 8 people, 9 people. They're depending that they are working in the rice field. Now, of course, I would have a bigger output, it go everything faster, but we can do this in our society because these people can be retrained, right? But our people cannot be retrained because there is no foundation of education. So this is the conflicts we have. But digitalized, I always say the digital evolution is something who has to start living with us from the beginning.
It's amazing. Alfredo, you mentioned before.
Well, no, I was just going to say there is also, so the big problem is who's going to finance this research? Who's going to put time into how to do the best, smartest village? Who's going to put time into figure out how a blockchain can actually finance slum dwellers, right? So that's the real issue. So how do we do it? So the university's got to be the incubator for that. Right, there's got to be partnerships between community NGOs, universities, businesses, and they've got to start to think about certain guidelines and certain visions and work on those together. There's no other way. But that would mean allocating resources. But there is a way, by the way. We're using blockchain, and I wanted you to explain, because I'm not very good at that. You can finance a project by just having hits. So you can actually put on the Bitcoin on the blockchain circuit series of projects that are all interlinked, and you can just hit on it, and the hit can become monetized, right? Maybe you can say something about that.
There's a lot of, I mean, blockchain in itself is a combination of a number of different things that we do today in trade. If we look at trade today, we're moving physical goods, we're keeping track of the documentation associated with those physical goods, and then we're moving payment associated with those goods. Blockchain actually gives us an opportunity to transition that into a single atomic transaction, which then allows us to do very simple things like trade property or move property around and not have to have a lot of infrastructure and intermediaries to do that. So it creates sort of new economic opportunities, and a lot of people are taking advantage of this in many different ways, some not good, to basically create new financial instruments essentially out of thin air.
Yeah. And then I want you all to bear in mind also the idea of Hernando de Soto, which you brought up, and I thought I'd go back to that, Tamar, which is Hernando de Soto wrote about the mystery of capital, saying that slum dwellers have capital. They have those informal houses that in Latin America are 2 and 3 floors, but they have no bankability. They're not in the credit, you know, they have no credit for those houses, which is the first asset that you can use to go into a bank, right? Now the problem with the whole Hernando Soto idea is that it's great and it's wonderful to create, tenureship and property, clear tenure, ownership of property. But if you don't have a toilet and you can't get to a mountain full of houses, then who wants to give a loan and a credit up to a favela house in the 30 stories up in the air, right? So the whole idea of Hernando Soto of being able to bring the credit line into the favelas and is also going hand in hand with infrastructure, with the building of infrastructure.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would like to open up the floor for some questions that might be in the round to the panel. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. My name is Pavel Luksha. I'm CEO of Global Education Futures, and some of you mentioned education. And you also mentioned that the cities that are currently being built don't have a vision for tomorrow, but we understand how tremendously society is changing and how tremendously the social layer of society is changing. So I did not hear much about how you incorporate that social layer, apart from your work, Alfredo, which I find amazing. How do you see the possibility of including communities as co-developers of the future city? How do you believe we can open up to integrate new social structures into this process, how we can make a city that is a city of lifelong learning also, and how can we make it like a collective dream? Can we shape the architecture that shapes our future?
Well, just to add to that, we don't remember this, but up to the beginning of late 19th century, cities were basically made by citizens themselves. If you go to Niederdorf, the old city of any old city of a European town, those negotiations, that's why you have such strange plazas and windows and buildings are all shaped in strange ways. Cities were built in negotiation by the citizens themselves, in town hall, in open meetings, and they would negotiate how the land would be developed. But ever since the 20th century, that has changed tremendously thanks to the United States, laying down grids and realizing that real estate is the way they finance their new country, right? And laying down these perfect grids from, coast to coast. And then it became a real estate business, right? So cities now became basically commodities. Cities became commodities. And it became a whole industry behind that. But that doesn't mean the cities that were created are better than the cities that were created by citizens themselves. And that's the real problem we have. How does the industry now, unless there's a major crisis, and there is crisis around the world, unless something's got to change the system of how we build cities.
Something's got to change the system. Questions? Yes.
Hi, my name's Saga. I'm a health scientist. I'm in public health, and I find everyone's talk to be quite interesting, actually. So my first question, I have a few, was for Tamer. Why do you think there's no vision? You mentioned that people are kind of, the Indian government, was it, that kind of using examples from China and parts of the UAE as examples. What are the barriers to having vision? Because vision is critical to sustainability and integrity of these, emerging communities and infrastructures. And in terms of the smart villages, I love that idea. I mean, 80% of Ethiopia is rural, and not everyone wants to leave the rural area. And actually, local villagers they have a raw intelligence that, I have a PhD, that can, they could trump me in a moment, let's just say that. So to what degree is water and sanitation, how are you linking your smart villages to like these Millennium Development Goals to make sure that they're kind of operating in tandem? And then the last thing I had to ask is, what is education? I mean, it's a very interesting question to me because I was educated in the United States, born and raised there, educated, and was humbled to find that there's so much knowledge where my family came from. And I feel as if I was almost taught to look down on that, and there was no reason to do that. There's so much to learn from the local communities themselves. So how do you define education when you're educating these young people? Because there's a lot to learn from them as well about what's best for them.
Yeah, I think I take the question. It's very important to understand when you start to really live and work with a society who is, say, underprivileged. And you are right, there is a very large cultural knowledge. And this cultural knowledge we should not replace, we should support. We should make it aware because it's going to disappear. But with this cultural knowledge, like in Cambodia, universities, everything is Khmer. This is a cultural language. So the agriculture engineers are educated in Khmer. The architects are educated in Khmer. But because it's isolated, there is no way you can go on with your education. There is no literature. There is no magazines about what things are changing. So you have these two things. My school is a bilingual school. So we support very much their culture. Also their festivities they have. We try to support this. We try to get out of the parents their knowledge. What do they teach? it's a different life, right? And then we have our Western kind of philosophy. Well, it's very simple. It's life skills so that you don't make your number 2 on the school floor, that you wash your hands after your meal, right? That you don't hit each other, because there is raw kind of power out there. That's the way they grow up, right? So that you respect your teacher, you respect your partners, whatever you have, and that's why we have a big problem with women. Women are very, very much suppressed, and it starts mainly with the young women when they have their first period, because there is nothing to protect them. There is no OBs, there is no anything, and then they hide. And when I tell you, if you ever have a chance, you go in a factory with 13,000 women, and if only 50 or 60 have a period, the smell is crazy. And then, of course, we have forced marriages. In Cambodia, you pay average $5,000 for a woman. But the woman has no right. Everything what the woman brings into the marriage belongs to the man. So very quickly she's pregnant, right? She has 2 children. Then the man walks off. If he has money, he buys the next one. So these women has to take care of these children. But when the children get in the age of 15, 16, the man comes back and takes the children. They have to work for him because they belong to him. So this is the problem. Where do you interfere there? Where do you tell them you should step out of this tradition? And where do you give them a knowledge to become more individual, become more themselves, right? And then you have the parents. You should never forget the parents. Africa proved that very good education system failed after 6-7 years. Why? That is a patriarchatic system. So if the child after 5-year education comes home and says to the father, you have no idea, you should not do like this, like that, the father will stop sending them to the school, right? So there also you have to see, how do you go around this culture? How do you involve the parents? Has to make a similar progress like the children have to do to get a better understanding. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges what we have in education in the third world, is to do it like this, and not coming and put our standards at them and say everything you did is wrong, you have to do now our way.
Don't impose other people's belief upon different
Correct.
societies and beliefs.
Correct.
One more question, please.
Hello, my name is Giacomo Loati. I work in the Unipol Group, that is the biggest insurance company in Italy, and so the question is quite selfish. I would like to ask you if, considering smart cities are infrastructure, our people, our houses, our mobility, and since insurance companies play an important role and a part on maintaining this system, so the simple question is, do you think that insurance company will play a significant role in the development of smart cities, and in case, which role do you think they will play?
Insurance will play one of the major roles. We are in Switzerland, we always complain how expensive our insurances are. But can you imagine we would have no insurance? We would have to save the money the whole year, and when we get sick, this money would go bang. If we wouldn't save the money, we could not go see a hospital. And this is the problem what the third world has. I went to AXA in Germany, and I said, my goal is in 10 years, 80% of the Cambodian has a health insurance. They will look at me like a madman. I said, why do you, but there is corruption and this. They said, yeah, but look at this, we have smartphones today. We can move an insurance in a smartphone. If I have 600,000 people in a province and 350,000 have a very simple health insurance, medications, can see a doctor, this will be a business. Suddenly we will have hospitals built on the countryside, pharmacies built on the countryside, doctors will move on the countryside. And health is one of the most important base for a society. If the society is sick, Cambodia, 52 to 56-year life expectation. 80% of the Cambodians die on diabetes, and it's the rice, because 90% of the diet is rice. This is starch and is sugar. We have 30-year-old people dying on diabetes because they eat rice. We have no way to fight that. And it would be very simple. So insurances, actually, they also should have the guts. They don't have it. They're very kind of, but it's really like this. If we put the insurance into the smartphones, like we have loans, credits in smartphones, we could roll maybe 85–90% of what's going on, and it would change a whole society. We need to understand Demographically, 2045, 2050, Europe and America is 20% of the world's population. 75% of the economical growth is in Asia. So if we at the end still, what you mentioned before, have 3 billion people who are not able to work, who have no skill, who are sick, who is getting the money to buy the products? By then we still can, through our innovation, develop. I mean, we need them. We need them more than ever. And insurances should really get on board and help us to do that.
Yeah, I can also add to that.
Okay, two more short. Yes, Andreas?
Yeah, I think also if we're going to lift a bit from the emerging economies to more Western economies, if we take UK as an example, insurance is looking very much at that at the moment. The gig economy, which is part of the shared economy, is sort of employing 1.1 million people. That's equivalent to NHS. And you all have followed probably in the media, Uber drivers, how are they insured? If you rent out your house with Airbnb, how does that work and so on? So you can clearly see a big shift with Airbnb. The company I used to work for is, if you're a retailer and you want to rent a space for 1 week, well, insurance today says, well, you got to have a long-term lease. It needs to be 3 years. You can't rent a space for a week. How does that work and so on? So I think it's very much an industry is in change and so on, but it's going to play an important role as well in Western countries.
Alfredo.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of our big supporters is Swiss Re. So it's a reinsuring company because they're very interested in cities. How do they lower their payouts, right, in the future? Mortality rates, health, fire, all those hazards. They have to do it. And we know from Novartis that people are moving into cities, right? But actually they're getting sicker. Pollution rates, stress rates, all these things are happening. So urbanization and densification is also bringing health issues. But all of this, and we're in Davos, and I just wanted to say before we got cut off, is that it's politics. Cities are frozen politics. What you see happening in cities has to be changed at the political level. Now, if we all agree that the power should go to the people, more people should start to be involved in the processes of how cities, then we need more transparent systems, right? So that everyone has access to information. But then our politicians who are going to deal with small, essential things like education, transportation, and a few issues, key issues, right? Then we need to make the politicians responsible to send their kids to public schools and not to private schools, because then they would ensure that public schools are good, and public hospitals. So politicians have to be the ones who signal the change.
Correct.
Thank you so much for the panel. I tried to summarize what we learned today. Smart you and the future of your city. How can you better accommodate a fast-growing population? From Alfredo, power to the people, community participation to plan happy cities yourself. Then we have from York, use digital technology to enable people to give them an identity and create a trust in local communities. Tamer, 4 points are important. Give people an identity, develop digital title to assets, take the first 2 in order to provide credit to buy a house. And the 4th, do follow Hernando de Soto. Very important. Andreas, unlock stranded assets by sharing economy. And Walter, put 35 of the street traffic that transports stuff on the ground. While Hannes, smart villages are the future. So people don't have to move into smart cities. And second, fly the drones over the fields to grow healthier carrots to feed a growing population. Thank you so much all for coming. Downstairs will be food.